Thank you all so much for being here and here being the internet so that I can join from Australia. I'm so delighted to finally get to an LCC. Today I'll be talking about Aramteskan, which is a language that I've worked on with the author PM Freestone, who can't be here today but says hello and is delighted to be part of this talk as well. The slides are at that link there. I'll also just bring up the chat briefly. I've never felt more like a confused old person than I have since started using Zoom, but I'll pop the link to the slides in the chat, and maybe someone who's monitoring the YouTube can share them over there, and I'll share them after the talk as well. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to scent typology in natlangs. So this talk will focus on scent. I apologize in advance to the anosmic and people who find scent difficult, but the talk is focusing on the scent-based features of Aramteskan, which was a central motivation for creating this language. So I'll talk about scent typology in real languages, scent in constructed languages, and what we found doing a bit of research there, and then how we approached bringing a rich focus on scent to constructing a language. And so this kind of bridges, this talk and this work kind of bridges my interest in having fun while doing conlanging, and bridging that with natural language typology, which is something I'm interested in for my day job. So I am a linguist at a university in Australia, and PM Freestone is an author and also just a full-time nerd like me. And although this is very serious work that we take very seriously, we also have a lot of fun doing this together. This project started out with PM Freestone putting together the shadow scent books, which I'll introduce in a moment, and me constantly just quizzing about how the world worked and how the language worked. And at one point I was like, let me at least build you a phonological inventory so your character names are consistent, one of the banes of my life. And we kept talking, and the structure of the language has come out of that collaboration. In natural languages, some languages have a much richer scent lexicon than English. There's a small group of psychologists and linguists who are interested in studying this across the world's languages. Sometimes it's that the lexicon has a richer set of scent vocabulary. There are some really nice examples where there is more encoding of scent in the grammar. So Chapala is a language of, it's in South America. I don't know if it's an Arawakan language, but it's kind of in that Brazilian Amazonian region, and you use a different nominal classifier to indicate the encoding of different scents, and there's about 8 different core scent classifiers you can use. Scent doesn't feature too frequently. Of all the human senses, we really prioritize sight and sound. Evidentiality is a source of information encoding in grammar, and it's one of the things I've spent most of my work on grammar focusing on. So of course, I had to go and look up what the typology said about scent-based evidentials, and that there are none attested in natural languages. There has been some work on English. Poulton, his study is specifically on Australian English, but I think it applies more generally, where English makes use of kind of 2 main strategies for encoding smell. One is source-based references, which essentially means that you say, that smells like a lemon, or that smells like a banana, and you refer back to the object that is the source of that smell. Or what he calls hedonic valence, and essentially that smells yuck or yum or tasty, and you make some kind of reference to kind of your response to the smell rather than the nature of the smell itself. So it's kind of a brief tour of where we're at in talking about scent in natlangs. A lot of the problem with that typology is just that there is an absence of, it's hard to tell always in these things whether it's just that it's an absence of the actual phenomenon itself, or people just haven't been paying attention to it. Similarly, we don't see a lot on scent in constructed languages. Of course, with conlangs, there's always a gap in the discoverability of people's work, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the conlang database later today. But if you have something to do with scent in a language that you've been working on that you think is particularly interesting, please let me know. In terms of scent in languages in fiction, essentially what you mostly find is scent is the modality. So we have spoken oral languages that are natlangs. We have sign languages that are natlangs. I know some people in this very conference have created fascinating languages out of other modalities, or you may have written an exclusively written conlang. The handful of constructed worlds with languages where scent is the modality tend to avoid aliens or insectoids of some kind. There've been a few discussions around how scent might work in the constructed language conlang listserv. So thank you to everyone there and those archived discussions. The only kind of vocabulary and using vocabulary in a spoken language to explore scent is it's described as a constructed language, but it's really just a lexicon. There's no grammar or discussion of any features beyond the lexicon, and even that is a phonological grab bag. The author is a perfumer who I think did this as a bit of a gimmick. I also have a problem with a lot of the, there's a lot of like Polish shop and Italian deli and very kind of reductive cultural stereotype sense in there. But there are some attempts also at kind of finding evocative ways to talk about very specific sense that we just don't have words for in English or many natural languages. So that's the state of the literature as we came into this project. Aramteskan is an a priori natlang, so I am very interested in, essentially my approach to language construction is to strongly and strenuously replicate typologically observed patterns in natlangs, but then also where it is relevant to the world that I'm constructing for, diverge creatively from what natural languages do. So to borrow David's term around weak naturalism, kind of taking everything that is beautiful and wonderful and amazingly elegant about language, but then allowing myself a more creative approach that helps enrich world building. I have a short clip from PM Freestone about introducing the Shadow Scent books and their approach to writing them. There are two books, they've been published. Book one has been published in the US, but not book two. But the other two books are available, and you can get the UK version in the US as well. They're young adult, set in a fantasy secondary world. I like to think of them as a cross between kind of Indiana Jones style romp and the beautifully evocative language of the book Perfume. PM Freestone is an amazing writer. It's such a privilege to get to work on this project. But I will hand over and take this opportunity to let them share their perspective.
Thanks, Lauren. We've long known that reading fiction provides more than entertainment. It's also a powerful impetus for developing empathy. And I don't know about you, but I know Lauren and I agree that more empathy for experiences outside of our own can only be a good thing. Taking this further, I choose to work in the speculative genres of literature, and in this case, fantasy, in order to ask what-if questions of a reader. A speculative lens provides the opportunity to examine contemporary issues from a different angle. And the big what-if question I was asking with the shadow scent world was, what if the most important sense in the world was smell? What would life look like? Or indeed, smell like? The shadow scent duology is therefore set in the fantasy empire of Aramtesh, where smell is the queen of the senses. Scent permeates the social, political, cultural, and economic spheres of this world, and is the central focus of everyday life. You need to burn the right incense combination for your prayer to reach the desired deity. People will make judgments about your social class or morals from the perfume you wear. And the most precious commodities across the empire include aromatic resins and rare flowers. Creatively, I'm seeking to build fictional worlds that feel fresh, exciting, and immersive. The entertainment factor. Intellectually, I am aiming for holistic and three-dimensional, and to weave texture into these worlds so that the speculative what-if question I'm asking of the reader feels convincing and credible. I knew from early on in the development of the scent-driven Aramtesh Empire that I could only create such a world if I did so from the ground up, otherwise it risked being a window dressing world, our world in a novelty store costume. So language would therefore play a key role in truly building a world where smell was prioritised, and I'm extremely grateful to Lauren for agreeing to work with me in those early days. Working with Lauren means that the world of Aramtesh had rich and credible linguistics, both in its present day and throughout its history. And having given you that background or insight, hopefully, into my creative process, I'll hand back over to Lauren so she can delve into the intricacies of Aramteskan.
There we go. Obviously, whenever you're eyeballs deep in a project, there's lots of things I would love to talk about, so I'm going to constrain it to the smell-based things. But I've occasionally blogged about my process of working on this language on my blog, Superlinguo. You can go to the link through the slides. And I've also submitted, as a way to stop myself continuing to tinker, I've submitted the grammar as it currently stands at the end of the 2 books to Fiat Lingua. So hopefully someone's checking that inbox, and I can share it with you sometime soon. So a absolutely rip-roaring tour through the scent-focused grammatical features. And if you have any questions, I'll make sure I get through this nice and quickly. Obviously, vocabulary was something that was very compelling for us to work on. A lot of these came out of our conversations, and even though a lot of the language doesn't feature in the books, it was a way for us to find a kind of common understanding of how people would approach smell in the empire of Aramtesh. And so you can see just a small handful. I think I literally have like 2 verbs for ambulating and moving forward. And then we have well over 20 just for the process of being the agent who is doing the smelling of something. And so just going to reply to Sai in the chat as we go. You can see a little bit of some historical morphological processes that have had a few phonological processes wrangled in there as well. On the left, you can see the output for the dictionary. I personally, to pick up on William's previous discussion, personally work in Toolbox because it's what I have worked in my day job, and I find that it is sufficiently flexible to force it to do whatever you want it to do. And then I run it through, well, these days I run it through Seymour to print out an MDF structured dictionary, which I find to be the most flexible and then aesthetically appealing workflow process, but I'm happy to chat about that more. Again, because evidentiality is something that I am so interested in my day job, I not only gave the language a scent-focused evidential, So that would be indicating that you know something because you smelt it. If you say someone's baking bread, if you know this because you can smell the aroma of bread baking, you would use the nal evidential particle at the end of your verb phrase. But because when I depart from natural typology, I like to depart in spectacular style. The smell-based evidential is not only something that doesn't exist in natural languages, but I've made it the most prominent and important sense of it, source of evidence. So if someone uses, I smell someone's baking bread, that actually takes priority over all other senses, whether you see or hear or can feel the bread in the oven or the proving oven, you would use the Khan evidential. And then I have a form for knowing something through reported speech as well, mostly because I've been working on a paper on reported speech evidentials forever. So this three-way evidential distinction absolutely does not exist in any natural language. Scent-focused nominals is one of those things that always seems like a really lovely idea in theory until you start actually building your language out to be used by even fictional humans. So this is where nominals, the kind of core noun is the smell of something. And then if you want to talk about the physical object, that's actually a derived form from the noun. So the word lirpa doesn't actually mean rose, it means the smell of a rose. And if you want to talk about the flower, you talk about lirpaya. And there's a historical form as well. So azmeb is that kind of smell of darkness. And then if you want to talk about the dark, so it's not just for nouns, I guess, it's also for, it's a noun, but you could use it to derive adjectives subsequently. As mebtor, you'd use the derived form there. And so this kind of is hard to track across large texts. So I talk about it as being a kind of historical thing. But this is definitely one of the most major divergences from natural languages in terms of working through translation. And then on a more kind of whimsical note, especially there are a couple of times where we had some texts translated. In book 1, there is a fantasy world fetch quest based on an ancient riddle, and we have a lot of fun making a few slide jokes about translation processes there. But instead of using a metaphor like faced in English, it's more literally translated as nosed towards the nose. And all spatial and temporal orientation is nosed focused as well. So I have a proximal determiner and a distal, and I also have one that's like, so I have this and that, but I have a that for something that's far away, but you can still smell it, and a that is too far away to be smelled. So whenever the opportunity presents, always bringing it back to a focus on scent. And one thing I really appreciate about having a kind of a playful use of constructed languages is that by using typology to inform your conlanging work, it also allows for an interesting or a different critical reading of natural language typology, because at every point you get to be driven by, but why do languages have to do this? Or is it just a tendency? So language construction work for me has provided an opportunity for a creative application of linguistic expertise and a creative exploration of the typological literature. You can get the references if you follow the link, which I'll leave here. And I'll leave you with the standard greeting in Aramtesh, which is Nulmur Smur de la Sral, sense keep you. And I can see there are quite a few questions in the chat, so I'll leave up the slides briefly in case you want to access either of our Twitter handles or these slides. And if it's okay, Joey, I'll just go straight to poking through the questions that have come in. Thank you so much.
By all means.
Thank you, Leichen, for your YouTube question. Does the primacy of scent affect the visual aesthetic options for people have around noses? Yes, in a particularly gruesome way, which is that the most severe punishment in the kind of carceral state of the shadow scent books is to have your nose cut off. So a complete kind of nose defacement is the kind of worst punishment and kind of brands you most visibly as a criminal. So that is a question I can actually answer around the world building from the books. George has asked, how can you really group scents together? It's really hard to relate smells together, especially as it's hard to get a bunch of them to smell together. And thank you, George, for sharing that experience. It is, I think scent is something that most of us don't critically interrogate beyond knowing what we do and don't like the smell of. PM Freestone actually also worked with a perfumer in the UK while putting these books together and spent a lot of time. They worked collaboratively to build a fragrance called the Darkest Bloom, which replicates the smell of the Dakai flowers from the Aramteskan world, but also just actually finding the words, even in English, to convey the world. And it's just, I think, a testament to how amazing a writer PM Freestone is, but also she's a complete super smeller who has really strong preferences around how smells work together. So it's a real challenge there. Margaret has asked if they're humanoid people in the secondary world. It is entirely a world of humans as we know them in their biology and physiology. Sorry, I'll come back to not sharing that screen with you anymore, but they are humans. Sorry, I should have mentioned a standard fantasy secondary world where you take us style humans and plonk them into a kind of fantasy-based world. Some people are better at smelling than others in this world. Raquel, one of our main protagonists, is a very acute smeller. He borrows a lot from PM Freestone, and some people are aware enough to know whatever the trends are, but moving through life relatively unfazed. But thank you for that clarification question, Margaret. Matthew has asked, what about things named after their smell and then they change their smell? That is a really great question. Matthew, I assume that's about the process of nominalizing objects from their scent. It's more about the kind of prototypical state in the way that, we don't start calling oranges greens once they go moldy. So to borrow a parallel from English lexical use there, we might call it a moldy orange. So we might call it an orange that has the scent of mold in Aramteskan. But thank you, that's a great question. Sai and Alex, I believe, have a question. Sai, did you want to jump on? Alex, hi, you're muted.
You'd think after a lot of online teaching it'd be over that. No, okay. Do you know any good cross-linguistic resources for smell terms? I guess it's like a data-based version of George's question, how languages group things together. Or did perfumers group smells together in some way that we can read about or anything like this?
I think different perfuming traditions absolutely do. And there are kind of scent wheels. I won't definitively quote PM Freestone on this, but I can't help but feel that the star charts and turning circles of the cosmology of Aramteskan, very much, I'm sure, related to these beautiful charts of like circular groups of smells that some perfumers have. There's like traditions, but I think different perfumers have their own idiosyncratic approaches. So kind of reading about a few traditions there. And then the person my go-to person, absolutely, and time and again, is Asifa Majid. She is a psychologist she's working in the Netherlands, but she has worked on, do sommeliers have a better sense of smell, or do they just have better technical vocabulary for describing the smells that they encounter? She's worked with people across a range of languages on what is the relationship between evoking smell and evoking particular colors. So her work is really fascinatingly diverse, but she also writes really engagingly as well. I find her academic work is very unintimidating and very approachable. But thank you, Alex, for that question. Joey has a question. Would you like to read yours?
This one's from Jasmine Scott. Sorry,
okay.
I didn't
That's okay.
copy the question.
Yes, sorry, I can see down there. Yeah. Thank you, Jasmine. Organs like heart and stomach and guts in English have metaphorical associations. Does this language have similar associations, and what associations are made with other organs? We didn't get too far into human physiology, too far beyond the nose, Jasmine, I will just confess, but you're right, definitely reverse engineering a world's medical system, I'm sure, would yield an incredibly rich set of associations there. I imagine something like the kind of humours of pre-modern European history, where there's an amount of balancing of humours that needs to be done. Leanne asks whether Aramteskan speakers value large noses. I think it's less about the aesthetics of the nose and more about the skill of the nose, is my gut feeling there. And then Tony Harris has asked, can I spell the name of the person for the references? She appears in the list of references on the slides, but I've just typed it into the Zoom chat so that someone can pop that over to the YouTube. But once you start poking around in Santon language, Asifa's name will keep coming up. You can't avoid her. And very luckily, because her work is really great. We've got another minute or so, but thank you everyone for your questions, and thanks for having me around today. I've really enjoyed the talks I've been awake for.
I'm really glad we were able to catch you, not at 2 a.m. in Australia.
Well, Joey sent me the original schedule and was like, I'm very sorry, but I'm not a night person. I'm not going to make the 2 a.m. talks, which I'm sure were excellent, but just not my awake time. So thank you for being so accommodating.
Happy. I will point out there are a lot of interesting discussions happening in the YouTube chat. If you have a chance to look at them, yeah. There's a number of conlangers who have ran with some ideas on scent-based things that might give you a few extra ideas.
Yay, thank you everyone for sharing. I'll pop over to the YouTube chat and join everyone over there. If you have any more questions, I guess pop them in the next minute or so and I'll try and answer them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren.
Thanks so much.
I hope you're having better weather than a lot of us in the other hemisphere. I'm looking outside and seeing it snowing now again.
We are. I'm sorry. I won't. Well, I only speak Celsius, so I won't tell you that it's really lovely here because it will sound like freezing still. But yeah.
Oh, it's 2 degrees Celsius here in Calgary, but snowing as I look outside.
It's definitely a bit warmer here.
All right. Thank you